Good evening, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for our very first Books on Stage, virtually, for the Cloverdale Performing Arts Center, our very first thing for the 2021 season. We're pretty excited to be here. We're excited that you're there with us as we kind of look back onto 2020 and ask ourselves, what the heck was that? We're moving forward. We've got some great programming coming down the pike for you. So follow us here on Facebook and on our YouTube page. Keep up with what's going on. Just because the coronavirus says we can't be in the theater, hey, look, we're the creative types. We're still doing stuff. We're still making programming for you. So keep following us. Tonight we are going to be having a chat with Art Whyte about his book, The Children of the Stars, Book 1, SAIQA. And I am pretty excited about this. If you are a fan of sci-fi, you're going to be pretty excited about this as well. So Art lives in Northern California. He's a performer that set aside his acting career around 2010 to make time for his family. Prior to that, he had performed for Nickelodeon, Universal Studios, Image Films, Toyota, Apple, and ILM, as well as semi-professional companies around Orlando, Florida, and the Bay Area. He's written and published poetry and rewrites for Universal Studios stage productions. His derivative of Harry Nilsson's Land of Point is registered at the Library of Congress. After 6.5 years in his spare time, he finished The Children of the Stars, Book 1, SAIQA. He is currently finishing Book 2. He projected much of the current cutting-edge science into the future. The goal is to make these characters' lives as believable as you and me stepping into our cars. The science is real. The projections are sci-fi. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with me, Art Whyte. Art, thank you so much for being here with me this evening. I am so excited to talk about your book. This is quite a feat, indeed. Why don't you start by just telling me a little bit about yourself, telling everybody a little bit about yourself, and then give us a little synopsis about what we're diving into here.
Okay. I thank you, first of all, Jude. Thank you very much for having me here to do this. Really, I appreciate it. I am living in Northern California, like you said, and am doing some more writing. My daughter, whom is living with me, I have just now found out is going to have a baby. So I'm going to be a granddad here pretty soon.
Yay.
So life is moving forward and onward, and it's actually quite beautiful. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that folds out. I did tell her the other night that I had this sweet little dream of holding a baby girl in my hand. So we'll see.
Hey.
So we'll see.
Well, congratulations. That's wonderful news.
Thank you. And Tara's doing great and strong, and it looks like everything's going to be great. So, excellent. And I've been doing a lot of writing, a lot of poetry. I've been publishing it online, and I'm working, as you said, on the second novel, which I'm deeply into, and it will more than likely be published this year. For those who have read the first book, it's just going to continue right on and take up all the action scenes, which are hard and fun to write at the same time. But let me give you, I'm sorry, Jude, you were going to say?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Please.
Let me go ahead and give you a bit of a synopsis of the essence of the story, the science behind the story. I am what I would say, call myself a Monday morning scientist. You've heard of Monday morning quarterbacks. I'm sort of a Monday morning scientist. When I started college, I started as an aeronautical engineer, and I never lost that, before I went into performing arts, I never lost that feeling of having to understand why things work. And so I now do a lot of nutritional work and alternative medicines for a company that I work for. And everything I do and look at, and that has to have some sort of a clinical or science base behind it. Otherwise, I don't recommend or mention it to people at all, because that's just the way that my brain functions. So I had been thinking about science and cutting edge science for a while, and also been wanting to write a story. And that the two of them came together to create this first novel. So I'm going to read you a bit of a synopsis about that.
Great. Thank you.
In my novel, The Children of the Stars, Book 1, SAIQA, I took what is now young emergent science and theoretical physics and set those 400 years into the future where they are applicable in the day-to-day lives of all of humanity. I focused on longevity using controlled telomerase and pluripotent stem cell regeneration, as well as advanced immune structure, giving humans a 150 to a 200-year lifespan. I used magnetic field architecture, which, and if anybody has any questions about this, they can ask me, which is the science behind the true hoverboards. I used a controlled form of quantum pinning to help the autonomous floating cars of my story come to stops. I projected the discovery of the graviton boson and its relationship with the Higgs boson, which eventually allows humans to manipulate gravity. With this knowledge, humans will be able to bend the third dimension and bring two distinct points together for instant travel. And by the way, that mathematical rigor for that is already present. Though in the first novel, only the aliens have that ability, humanity, though close, does not have that traveling ability yet, and they do attain it in the second novel. I also touched lightly on the very young field of multidimensional science as theorized in the so-called brain world physics, which is another new form of physics, which may explain dark energy. And I also contemplated what telepathy might look like. Humanity in my novel has achieved a peaceful democratic society planet-wide. This after a devastating worldwide war and natural disasters due to climate change that happens near the end of, unfortunately, this century. More than half the human population was lost. After humanity regained control of rogue governments and corporations, they began the long climb back to the peaceful societies in my novel. In the novel, the UN Security Council has 7 permanent members and 2 floating members. They created a military organization called the Worldwide Protection Agency, the WWPA. Its mission was to bring a powerful military presence in between 2 nations that are on the verge of war, forcing the aggressive nations into negotiations. For the most part, they were successful. In the novel, humans have developed and populated 4 moon bases, a large covered city on Mars, outpost on Titan, and a giant space station called Sanctuary. The AI that runs the space station is called Sanctuary's Artificial Intelligence Quantum Administrator, or by her acronym, SAIQA, the name of the first novel. Using parts of the rare earth hypotheses and Fermi's paradox, I have only 2 other alien species that have the ability to travel through space. They are the immortals, of which there seems to be only 2 left, and the Enhagreen, whom are aggressive and dangerous. Of the 2 immortals, one, whose name is Talus, and the other, and for the lack of a better word, good, and the other, Enegalu, who is arrogant or not so good. It was Enegalu who taught the primitive Engarine advanced scientific knowledge. Unfortunately, their science knowledge was far more advanced than their social maturity, and because of that, they eventually destroyed their own planet and now are a space-borne species. This and other things led to a conflict between the 2 immortal aliens. And through telepathic manipulation, the humans were being drawn into that conflict, and bit by bit, chaos accrues on the moon, Sanctuary on Earth. Throughout the novel, SAIQA begins to question her existence, and by the end, something tragic happens, and SAIQA makes an independent decision that brings the humans closer to all-out war. Commander Anna Stiggs, who is in command of the entire space station, Sanctuary, finally gets SAIQA to listen to her, and after some conversation, SAIQA asks Anna, "What does it mean to love?" Anna suddenly realizes that SAIQA may not just be a computer, but possibly another sentient being under her command. In the epilogue, in the first book, we learn that more about the Enneagram, their social structure, their religion, and their evolution. One of their military commanders wants a science from the 2 immortal spaceships. He is leading the Enneagram through space, following Talus's ship, which is named Galaxy. Galaxy, he believes, the science aboard Galaxy will give him supreme power. He longs to be the emperor. They don't know about Earth yet. The first contact between the 2 species doesn't go well. And that's in the second novel. And that's my synopsis. So I know there'll be questions. So if they come up,
Wow. That's a lot. That's a lot. How long did this take you to write?
It took me 6.5. The first book took me 6.5 years to write, and a lot of that was because I wanted to be as true to the science as possible, even though I'm projecting its final day-to-day uses. But I wanted to have that down as much as possible. So there was a lot of research going on, and also a lot of learning to write a novel. That was quite an experience. I recall as I was writing the novel, somewhere on the first chapter, I kept rewriting it. And partially because some of the science was too much, partially because I wasn't pleased. And so I kept rewriting it, and then I was stuck. And I looked around for people who are professionals to see what kind of input I can get from them. And I read Stephen King's book on writing, and that was a revelation. I was like, wow, okay, now I know what to do. And basically I mean, there was much I learned from that novel, but basically what he said was write 10 chapters and then go back and look what's going on, because by the time you get to the 10th chapter, your characters are telling you what the story's doing. And then you can go back and then you can finesse it, make the characters tell the story as opposed to you telling the story. The narrator is there to guide and be a sort of an omniscient person that's kind of behind the character's thoughts and movements and what have you, as opposed to telling the story. And that was really an eye-opener for me. It was very profound, and that helped me get through the book pretty quick. I know that after I read that, I sat down and started writing chapter 2, and in my first novel, that's one of my favorite chapters, and that came out of me so fast. In a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, I had written in a first outline or first draft about 22,000 words, and I was just floored. And I walked away, and I told my girlfriend at the time, I said, I know what muse means. Now I know what muse means, because it just poured out of me. I just couldn't figure it out, but it poured out of me. And it was a cool experience, but primarily because of my influence, or Stephen King's influence on me from his novel on writing.
What authors were you into as a young man?
I don't remember the author's name, but I remember as a young man that I loved those series by Tom Swift and his adventure stories. And a lot of them were in space. So I guess I was always a science fi guy. Even when I used to play as a kid and climb in trees, I imagined I was taking off in rocket ships. But Stephen King, Isaac Asimov, R.C. Clarke, Robert Jordan, and his fantasy stories, which are really fascinating. He's a very good writer. The English writer, goodness, I'm spacing on his name now, but he wrote Dragonbone's Chair. Anyway, he was a very big influence on me too. And Doug Brown, who just wrote a book, I had it in front of me, I should have brought it out here, based on what is it actually very scientific. It's based on what is the idea of human and religion and science, and how do they come together. And it was a very good book. I'll have to get that for you if we get a moment, and I'll get that title out to you. It's a good one from Doug Brown.
Awesome. Well, are you prepared to share a little of the book with us this evening?
I am. Yes, I am. I'm very much so prepared. I picked out about 5 different reads, and most of them short, because I also, if time allows and if it's okay, I would like to do a sneak peek on the second novel, which I have a couple of excerpts from that too. So that would be another thing I'd like to do.
We would love to have that scoop. Absolutely, there's time for that. It's my show. What am I going to do? Say no? Yes, please.
All right, so out of the first book, I'm going to jump into the first chapter where there's a lot of exposition, and I wanted to show a little bit about the size and scope of some of the things, like the size of Sanctuary, the space station, and the human ingenuity and going behind it through the character's eyes. So I'm going to start with one of the protagonists. Actually, I'm going to deal with mostly protagonists in the first book, in the first readings that I'm doing here.
Okay.
So let me read. Teresa sat in the OIC, officer in charge, chair, and the virtual command screen seating, CS, floating in the air before her. In her mind's eye, she could see Eric's face as he groaned. His strong Norwegian chin dominated a face topped with slightly curled blonde hair and green eyes. He was strong and fit. And with his shoes, he stood just less than 2 meters. Where did he get those green eyes? She often had that thought. Through his helmet, she had watched as he approached the satellite. She let out the breath she was holding as he secured himself to the energy wings of the orbiter. Their conversation was light. She loved him. She was not in love with him, but she loved him. It could happen that she would fall in love with him, but for now, she wasn't ready. As she got to work on the satellite, she pushed her fingers up into the left of the screen. The view from Eric's helmet swished up into the left corner and minimized into an icon. SAIQA, Teresa spoke to the main computer. I am leaving all Spacecom's links open to you as per safety rigs. My shift is over, and I believe that Anna is next up as OIC. Confirmed, and thank you, Captain Jacobson, SAIQA responded. Thank you, SAIQA. Throughout the space station sanctuary were thousands of smaller, independently intelligent computers. They performed hundreds of thousands of computations every second. A system this complex would appear chaotic, except that it was under the control of a much larger central quantum brain called Sanctuary's Artificial Intelligence Quantum Administrator. SAIQA was the first true artificial intelligence computer. She was constantly interacting with all of the ship's computers, as well as with the solar system and the universe around her. SAIQA's parallel processing brain was designed very much like a human brain, and in fact, the base of her brain was made up of a mixture of biosynthetic and organic neurons. The science to support her neurons, though infinitely more advanced, was still based on the principles of the ancient Konoku chip, invented in the 21st century, which is a chip, by the way, that has been invented already. While cognitive awareness necessarily involved her in all of the daily functions of the sanctuary, at the same time, she could interact independently on many levels with the humans that had created her. Teresa glanced back through the clear computer screen, or the CS, out into the main loading dock, or MLD. Though used by some civilians, the MLD was primarily there to support Sanctuary's mission. In the dock, and off to her far right, were a few personal space yachts. Those huge ships belonged to some of the VIPs who lived or worked aboard Sanctuary. Some of the bigger corporations, and the very wealthy, of course, had their own private docks in some of the more luxurious quarters above ComDeck. Next to the space yachts was the main docking area for the WWPA Space Division. It was an impressive display of military cruisers and support security ships. The two larger battleships were currently on a deep space mission testing their newly designed EM-4 thrusters. If the new thrusters worked as predicted, it would cut the travel time between the moon and Mars by half. The solar system was getting smaller. The rest of the MLD was dedicated to the main science and crew's needs. Consequently, the MLD was always active. A flashing yellow light near the top of the CS told her one of the civilian ships was prematurely moving from its authorized hold position. Teresa pulled down the flashing light down to the screen and at the same time opened a comlink to the ship. The thumbnail expanded and a young man and woman popped up on the CS before Teresa. This is Captain Jacobson, OIC, and you are not authorized to move into a docking position yet. Sorry, Captain. We saw the other ship was moving and the kids were getting antsy. And he motioned his hand as if they're pointing the kids behind him. I understand. But as you can see, due to the heavy volume of visitors and for your own safety, everyone needs to stay put and wait until you are signaled to approach the civilian docking bay. I see that you have only one ship ahead of you. Moving or not, I would hate to have to put you and your family in restricted quarters when you have come so far and are so close. We wouldn't want that either, Captain. Then we're all clear on how this works. Yes, ma'am, the man said. The woman was nodding her head. Good. Thanks for your cooperation. Enjoy your stay here on Sanctuary. Captain Jacobson, out. Teresa closed the window by pushing the frame back up. Fortunately, they always cooperate. She thought as she looked back out into the MLD. The huge doors spanning 100 meters intermittently stood open, exposing the bay to space. There was a large landing and working dock that ran the length of the bay and reached out another 50 meters into space. It was nearing the end of her shift, and most of the day's business was winding down. Still, there was plenty of activity. People in the bay were moving about, doing their specific jobs, and those few still out in the docks were moving a little slower due to the MMUs wrapped around the upper part of their Z-27 Orlan suits, perfected by MQ Space Industries. The MMUs were required in open space, even though the dock was gravitated to match the moon about 1/6 the gravity of Earth. The ever-present repair bots were also keenly aware of humans working in open space within the vicinity of the space station. As she looked out the bay and toward the Earth, she caught sight of her reflection in the window. Her ginger red hair was pulled back, the bangs fastened at the back of her head. Her big blue eyes genetically highlighted, as was the style of her generation. She was 45, yet because of the telomerase cell life extension program, or the TCE, she still looked to be in her early 20s, if that. She was considered quite beautiful. She was wearing her dress uniform, light gray, with red and black trim. It was, after all, Sanctuary's 150th anniversary. She was a captain of the WWPA Space Division, and she would represent it with dignity and honor. I'm going to jump ahead to where Eric is coming back from the satellite that he was working on.
All right.
Well, ground control would command the communication satellite back into its proper orbit. He had quickly patched the small hole, and now that he was done, he took a moment to admire his work. Nice, if I do say so myself. Why, thank you, Eric. And I think the same of you, a voice chirped through his earpiece. Teresa, I thought you were off duty and getting ready for practice. I was. Anna was called up to the comm deck. SAIQA is looking for a replacement OIC, and I want to give you a heads up that today's race may be delayed or probably canceled due to some unexpected solar flare activity. The Van Allen belt, plasma and particle flux can be unpredictable, as you know, often causing a shift in the safe zone. So I think it would be prudent for you to finish admiring yourself and get back to the ship. Okay, Red, I'm on my way. Great. I'll see you in a bit. Covering the 3,000 or so kilometers back to Sanctuary would only take about 20 minutes. The quick and powerful thrust of the side propulsion rockets pushed Eric back down into his seat. As he neared his designated speed, he cut the rockets. His weightlessness returned, and it felt like he wasn't moving at all. When he opened the magnetic sail, it sparkled and illuminated like a faint aurora as it engaged. The aurora across the sail would ebb and intensify with fluxing solar winds, creating a rainbow of colors flowing and splashing all around the sail. Some of the personal space yachts and racing ships had sails that were maybe 4 to 10 times as big and could radiate like the northern lights. Some of the owners of these personal ships expended great pains and great amounts of money to make their sails and the top decks mimic the more classic ocean-going schooners of Earth. With the main sail, the jib sail, and the head sail all engaged, these ships looked like they were cutting across some great ocean in space. Sometimes Eric could imagine a wake of foamy stars pushing out from their bows. With artificial gravity along the deck and surrounded by a basic graviton energy shield, the owners and their guests could wear minimum spacesuits and walk and sit on the top deck as if they were sailing in the oceans far, far below. Their large, bright sails washed the ships with multicolored lights. In his mind, Eric could imagine the wind pushing back the sailors' hair as if they were yachting in the pristine ocean waters of KwaZulu-Natal near Richards Bay in South Africa. The solar winds were, of course, much more dangerous, a bit more deadly. Eric adjusted his magnetic sail as Sanctuary came into view. The top and bottom and north side of Sanctuary were flattish and housed powerful electromagnetics. They created a man-made electromagnetic field that surrounded the space station. Near the electromagnets and at both ends of Sanctuary were high-intensity or HIP laser protons for protection against space debris and meteoroids. There was also propulsion units at either end for rotation and orbital integrity. The space station was home to nearly 50,000 humans. It was a spectacular display of human ingenuity orbiting the Earth's northern hemisphere about 12,000 kilometers above the surface and in the safe slot of the Van Allen belt. The entire structure was an astonishing 1.5 kilometers long, just under a half a kilometer at its widest at the top, and had 2 extended concentric rings that were storage and living areas just above the center. Each circle was about 600 meters in diameter and was connected to the station with long spokes. The bottom or southern part of the space station was the oldest, and so it was a bit thinner. At the upper center and just above the encircling wings, or the circles, or the rings, or wings as spacers called it, the station bubbled a bit, allowing more room for administration command center. The brightest lights were at the admin center, where most of the control room visage plates were open. Because of the lights and the gentle budge at the center, let me start that again. Because of the lights and the gentle budge of the admin comm area and the rings and the slight taper from the north to south, from the distance, the space station looked like a giant dragonfly in space. So I'm going to jump up to another protagonist deeper in the book. His name is Johnny Bluefeather Smith. He's from the Blackfeet Nation, and he is a genius. And he and 5 other students around the world won a contest from MQ Space Industries and the contest was about space and science. And he won it because he determined a unique way to get the 2 different parts of the third dimension to fold together outside the solar system where there is less gravitational pull. And because of that and the other winners, they all won a prize. The first prize is a trip to Sanctuary for its 150th anniversary. This is them going up to a space platform, which is above the planet right now, pretty much in the same area as ISS-1 is right now, about 300 kilometers up into space. And there's 4 space platforms up there right now. One of them is a pleasure space platform, and that's where they're headed. As they got closer to Space Island, Johnny and the young winners were beaming, as were the adults. While the ship was pivoting in preparation for docking, the kids bounced from window to window to get a better view of the pleasure and science-based space platform. The MQ Space Industries luxury spaceplane worked its way into the VIP slot and fastened on the platform's mechanical latches. The winners and their families were to spend 2 days on the entertainment island, enjoying all of the science-oriented interactive museum rides. Finally, after 2 full days of entertainment, all the families took turns going through a decontamination tunnel and boarded the big interplanetary ship, the Stardust Cruiser. This particular cruiser offered rooms for up to 200 guests and was large enough to visit all 3 of humankind's extraterrestrial settlements, the space station Sanctuary, the Moon, and Mars. After the Stardust Cruiser accelerated to its designated speed, the captain announced to all passengers that she was going to pop the Stardust's sails. Johnny's family, along with the others, chose to go to the huge cruiser's front forward viewing deck. The captain performed a dramatic countdown, and suddenly all the ship's magnetic sails popped into view. The sudden explosion of colorful auroras along the sails drew oohs and ahs from all aboard. Even the captain, who was explaining the basic physics behind the auroras, stopped talking for a full 2 minutes. Finally, she said, "Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the most colorful I've ever seen these auroras." Johnny Bluefeather Smith was sitting near the front of the viewing deck, nodding his head and wearing a big smile. It took nearly a little under 2 hours for the Stardust to reach Sanctuary, another hour for it to dock and latch onto the giant space station's mechanical bits. Sanctuary required all visitors from Earth to walk through yet another decontamination tunnel. And after the usual identification, verifications, baggage pickup, and agricultural inspections, the families were met like dignitaries in the passenger receiving area, a couple of decks up from where the cruiser had docked. On that reception deck was a large open viewing area where Johnny could look out into space. The Earth itself was just off to his left, partially cloaked in night. Bright spots of light scattered across the darkened continents. The Stardust was still docked about 50 meters below, surrounded by busy service pods. But what drew Johnny's breath away were the billions of stars. Everywhere he looked, the stars were brilliant and beckoning. Beautiful. His smile reflected his thoughts. The Smith family was led to their quarters on D7, the VIP deck. After settling into his room, Johnny went out the sliding hatch off the main family room and onto their personal quarters observation platform. There, in clear view, in a giant circle around him, were all 19 decks of Sanctuary's lower visitor and commercial center. The open interior, at just 100 meters across and more than 300 meters tall, was enormous. Johnny stood still, awestruck by the incredible ingenuity that had gone into designing such a huge structure. Just managing the air, water, and waste alone to serve the thousands of people who visited, worked, and lived in this section of the ship had to be incredible. Everywhere he looked, there were people. "It's bigger than I remember." Johnny's dad had walked out and stood next to his son. Johnny shook his head. He had forgotten that his father had once been a sergeant major in the WWPA. "When's the last time you were here, Dad?" "About 30 years ago." John was looking up a few decks toward what looked like some of the official dwellings and offices. Johnny, like most youngsters, was still trying to grasp the idea of how young his parents looked. Even in their 60s, his dad barely looked 25. John pointed and his son gazed and followed. "See, decks 9 and 10? There was a huge cover across the space station at that level because they were still installing the local admin offices and business suites at that time. I was part of the crew that was installing the second fusion reactor, some 50 or so meters above the stadium floor. The 19 decks that ran up and down the cylinder were already established, though decks 17, 18, and 19 gravitated towards the Meteor Stadium. They are the only public decks in Sanctuary that gravitate toward the ship's northern pole. Well, how did people get from deck 16 to deck 17 without falling into each other? Well, they're curved walkways. I get it. They walk up the walkway around the next deck because artificial gravity is limited to maybe 12 meters, and because the decks are a minimum of 16 meters apart, they can create a singular graviton walkway that adjusts its pull so it feels like you're simply walking up a hill and down to the next. Brilliant. Yes, my boy, that was the intention. Johnny smiled. Still, it's kind of Escher-like if you watch him from one deck or another, to see people walking up a staircase and then suddenly they're upside down walking to the next deck. No matter what deck you're on, it's got to look weird. Now I'm going to jump up to the family getting ready to enjoy part of the festivities on deck 1. But also, well, you'll see. So they're just getting ready to go up. So Johnny had seen just moments after we had talked about him looking out on the deck, he had seen people floating in the air, and they were using air jets. And they were able to do that because all the gravity is based basically in 12 meters. So it's based for each deck. But once you get into the center of the ship, there's no gravity. And he was fascinated by that. And he's been cajoling his parents to go do that ride, that one special ride. And they're about ready to do it. They queued their way to the top of the launch platform. At last, the three of them were strapped into their air jets and safety gear. Excuse me. Remember, their guide said, repeating the rules of zero gravity flight before they took off. Stay close to me at all times. No independent thrill rides. I guarantee you will be thrilled by what we do. Then he pointed to the security personnel already in the air. Besides, if you go off on your own or bother any of the guests on any of the dwelling decks, those folks will haul you into security, and you may miss the anniversary grand celebration, which is happening, and he looked at his HCI, in another 6 hours or so. He checked the family's equipment to make sure it was properly set. Ready? Ready, Johnny said before anyone else could speak. John smiled at Nina, and the guide gave, Nina is his mom, and the guide gave Johnny a quelling look. Johnny offered a sheepish smile. After all, flying around with a pretend space maneuvering unit in zero gravity was almost like being an astronaut, wasn't it? Okay, their guide finally said. First, I'm going to lift up about 10 meters from here. There I will be in zero gravity. You all follow on my cue, and we'll do a few maneuvers so you can get used to these air jets. He lifted up, and after a few seconds, he motioned, and they followed. It took Johnny and his dad, John, only a couple of attempts before they were fairly competent with their machines. After a few tumbles and a little patience, Nina got the hang of it, and up they went. Johnny was so thrilled at the ability to fly, all he wanted to do was zoom around. But every time that thought came up, he caught sight of the security guards and calmed himself down. Besides, the guide kept floating over to Johnny as if to keep his excitement in check. At about 60 meters above deck 1, the guide stopped them in midair and said, "Okay, now let's turn off our jets." "Are you crazy?" shouted Johnny's mom. The guide and Johnny had a good laugh. Apparently, that was the response the guide had been hoping for. "Mom," Johnny said while trying not to laugh, "there's no gravity." He turned off his jets and floated in space with a big smile on his face. "Look, Mom, I'm an astronaut." Nina laughed at her gaffe and joined the others in turning off her machine. At that instant, the atmosphere of the entire space station changed. The ambient light became flashing red and yellow. SAIQA's electronic voice, at least Nina thought it to be SAIQA, started repeating, "This is a Category 1 emergency. Security personnel will please escort all guests to their assigned quarters. All ship's personnel will report to their individual emergency stations. This is a Category 1 emergency," on and on. Nina felt stunned. She looked over at her husband, who was looking at Johnny. She followed his gaze and saw her son holding his head in obvious pain. Startled, she started to swim over to Johnny. John was already restarting his jets. Frustrated at getting nowhere fast, Nina pointed to Johnny and yelled at the guide, "My son, my son." At this time, Johnny's eyes rolled up into his head. He went limp and floated like a rag doll in place. The guide started his jet and zoomed over to the unconscious boy. While checking Johnny's vital sounds, he spoke into his HCI. 2 security staff flew toward the family. Nina started to turn her jetpack on, but a hand reached out, and a female security officer said, "Ma'am, I will guide you. Do not turn on your jetpack until we get near some AG. I will tell you when." "My boy." "Yes, ma'am, we have him." Nina looked over and saw another security officer was taking Johnny down toward the infirmary on D1. "What room are you in?" the security officer asked Nina. D7, hatch 28. D7 28, the officer yelled to the officer near Johnny's dad. The security guard started to usher them toward the dwelling, but John zoomed away toward his son and the infirmary. "Nina," he yelled. She grabbed her controls and firmly said to the security officer, "I am going with my son." The woman looked at her and nodded. "Follow the boy," she said to the other guard. Now, I could read a little bit more about that to give you an idea of what's going to happen, but I also want to read from the other, or book number 2. Is that okay, Jude, if I read a little more?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. All right, I'm going to read just a little bit more at the end of this chapter, and it gives you a pretty good idea of what's going on. Well, gives you a hint of what's going on.
Great.
So Dr. Misha ran the main infirmary on deck 1. She was confident, friendly, and often mentioned as one of the reasons a guest visit to Sanctuary was so enjoyable. But at that moment, she was harried. There had never been a Category 1 emergency while she was aboard Sanctuary. Sure, there had been drills, but an actual emergency? No. She instructed her 2 nurses to strap down anything loose in case of loss of AG, or artificial gravity. She pulled her emergency kit and was talking to the security captain when the guards brought in the boy. "What happened?" "Not sure. He was passed out when I got to him." "Get him out of that jetpack and lay him down in the back. Remember the emergency," she added, "and be sure to strap him down. Andy, you're with me. Lois finished securing this deck." She turned to the head of security. "Gary, call me if you need me. This obviously isn't a training drill." He nodded and went back to his matriculation screen. Gary was her best liaison to security and a good friend. He started giving orders through his HCI. Nina, followed closely by her husband, came rushing in. "Where's my son? Where's Johnny?" "You're obviously the mother and father." Misha's voice was soothing. "I'm Dr. Misha Gregory. Tell me what happened. Let me see my son." Misha led Johnny's parents to the bed in the back of the infirmary. Nina ran up to him and checked his vital signs and pupils. "You're a nurse?" Misha said. Nina nodded. "Good. I may need you if this turns out to be a serious emergency. Are you going to tell me what happened?" "Don't know." "Do you have a clot scan?" "Yes," Misha said, and motioned to Andy. He moved over to the medical computer terminal, typed in a code, and a portion of the wall opened, revealing a variety of sanitized medical tools. He picked out a clot scan and handed it to Dr. Misha. She walked to Johnny's bedside and started to examine him. "We were up in the air with those silly jetpacks," Nina said. "We had just turned off the jets when the alarm sounded. I looked over and Johnny was pulling off his helmet, yelling in pain. He was screaming, 'Igalu,' or something like that, and he just passed out." Dr. Misha ran the scanner over Johnny's head a few times. "Everything reads normal. There are no clots or disruptions." She turned to Nina. "Can you hold his head to the side a bit?" Nina did as she was asked. "I've never seen this before," Dr. Misha said, puzzled. "What?" Dr. Misha again passed the scanner over a certain area. "There's a high amount of biomagnetic activity at the back of his brain." She looked at Nina. "Does he get migraines?" Johnny sat high above the land. He vaguely knew of this place, but why was he here? He felt confused. Something was compelling him to look down. Red-winged vultures seemed to permeate the hazy sky just below him. Down below, far below, on the plains, he saw people dead or dying everywhere. The few who were living walked dazed and stunned over bloody ground, looking for something or someone. The vultures created a great circle around the mountain where he was sitting. Their eyes fixed on the ground, their anticipation was obvious as they soared above the carnage, watching and waiting like starving dogs under their master's dining table. Are they waiting for a command? Are they just waiting for the last of the Nitz's Tapi to die? He was thinking. "The people are dying," he screamed as loud as he could. With sudden realization, he knew where he was. Johnny sat atop Great Chief Mountain. How did I get here? Below, his people were dying by the thousands. Johnny stood on and looked helpless. "I'm too far away. What can I do?" he yelled. The sight of the blood and the red-winged birds ready to prey on the dead and dying below brought tears to his eyes. Johnny suddenly heard a shrill shrieking in the air below the vultures. His gaze followed the sound, and he saw a tiny raptor. It was a blue-winged kestrel. The fierce little bird was flying from below and among the vultures, attacking those that came too close. The kestrel flew up, and then landed a few feet to the left of Johnny. The bird sat there and looked at him. Johnny again stared at the dismal picture below and, feeling helpless, turned away and looked back to the bird. The kestrel had turned into a short, squat man who was sitting on a rock where the bird had landed. The man said, You must get back to your land, Johnny. You must leave sanctuary as soon as you can. You will be needed. You are a brave young man." Johnny looked down again. The people lay dead, dying everywhere. The vultures waited. He knew he had to get back home. He turned back to the man to reply, but the man was gone. Where he had been sitting, there in the ground lay a blue feather. Johnny walked over. He picked up the feather and put it into his pocket, and then he woke up. When he could finally focus, there was a pretty woman with light gray eyes looking down at him. Who are you? Where am I?" he said as he started to rise and then stopped. The restraints kept him down. "Do you know who you are?" Dr. Misha asked. "Help me. Here, take his hands." Nina held his hand, and as he gazed back at her, he said, "Mom, what's going on? Get these straps off me, please." Nina quickly pulled the strap down off Johnny's arms and legs. "Do you know where you are?" the doctor asked. Johnny looked about and sat on the edge of the infirmary's bed and said, "Yes, I'm on sanctuary." Misha nodded. "Again, do you know who you are?" "Yes, I'm Johnny Bluefeather Smith." He suddenly thought of the feather, and he reached into his pocket. He pulled out a couple of small Space Island pamphlets. Stuck in between them lay a blue feather. Johnny pulled it up close to his face. Was it real? He turned to his parents. "Mom, Dad." And he looked at the feather again and then back to them. "Well, we have to get back home soon." He looked at everybody in the room. "Something bad is going to happen." And that ended that chapter.
Wow.
So that's from book one, and it progresses from there, of course, to more bad and good things happening too. And I don't want to give away more anymore. But for those who have read the novel, I have a couple of short little pieces to do a sneak preview from book two. So I'm going to jump into that if that's okay. And
Absolutely.
I'm going to do.
Yeah, let's go.
Thanks, Jim.
You
This is from chapter one. Now, in the epilogue of book one, Anna realizes that her father is somehow involved in all the chaos that's going on, and she realizes that the other immortal, who is not so good, Galu, is involved in telepathically influencing her father. She believes that she could see her father, even though she'd been forbidden not to by the civilian president or ambassador to the ship of Sanctuary, which is still run by civilians. It is true democracy. She believes that she could convince her father to come back to her. And so the ambassador told her she's not to do that alone at all. She's not, basically he said not to do it, but somehow he said the word alone. And so she got somebody else to go with her. And this is her first meeting with her dad on the ship.
Awesome.
Luau is the second in charge of the Ark, and he's not a nice man. "This way," Luau's gruff voice brought her back. He was standing at the end of the foyer and gestured off to her right. She looked at Mark, Captain Thompson, and followed Luau's direction into what was clearly her father's office and command room. It was rectangular and spacious. Thank you. At the opening of the foyer were a few classic paintings that had survived the corporate wars. A couple of small backless settees were secured to the floor at the front of the paintings. A little further in was an ornate dining table, followed by a lounging area, and finally her father's office at the end. Along her right was his collection of humankind's space flight memorabilia. She thought of all the joy she used to have as a child, looking at and touching her father's spaceship collectibles. That thought at that moment pained her heart. There was a large viewing plate on her left that encompassed about 2/3 of the wall. Liao stopped them near the center of that viewplate. There she and Mark stared out at the bow of the great ship, the Ark, that her father had built. "She looks like she's ready for battle," it was Mark. Anna nodded. There were weapons along the sides and mounted at various points in the center of the deck. Some of the weapons had that weird fan-shaped barrels that Anna could only guess were the new graviton weapons she had heard about from Vanessa. A couple of people moved like ants around those fan-like weapons. It was a big ship. Anna! Her father had come up from behind. Her first reaction came from a place of anger as she slapped him across the face. Chaos ensued. Liao grabbed Anna by her hair and jerked her back. Captain Thompson grabbed Liao by the neck and pulled him back. Liao let go of Anna and spun around into Mark and punched him in the neck shoulder area. Mark pushed Liao away, and as he did, he punched him in the jaw as hard as he could. Because of the ship's lighter gravity, the force of the punch caused Mark to temporarily lose his balance. Liao fell back and bounced, but recovered quickly. He crouched low and pushed his way back to Mark, who saw this and crouched low to receive the charge. They hit and banged off each other, both losing control. During all this, the soldier that had his weapon aimed at Mark was yelling, "Sir! Sir! Sir! Liao! I order you to stand down. Sergeant, stand down. Liao, stand down now. That is an order." Liao stayed face down for a few seconds, then slowly stood up, brushed off his clothes, checked his jaw, and put on his slimy smile. "As you command, sir." He walked over to Maikwan and gave him a slight bow. As he walked past Mark, he quietly said, "I am going to kill you." Mark laughed under his breath. He brushed himself off and looked toward Anna. She was looking at her father. "You see, my dear, what kind of chaos unchecked emotions can cause. I choose the first part of Mr. Glassow's quote. Success isn't a result of spontaneous combustion." He rubbed the side of his face. "Calm down. You look beautiful as always, my dear." He stepped toward Anna, but she raised her hand. "It hurts me. It pains me, Father, to think that you were involved with the deaths of some of my personnel. Is there more death coming? Why, Father, why are you doing this?" Anna had an epiphany. "Are you the army of one that you warned me to be wary of? It will reveal itself soon. But for now, you are my... I don't want to know soon, Father. I want to know now. Why are you doing this?" "It is for humanity. It is to bring humanity out to the stars. We have people doing that. We have you working with the WWPA Space Division. You have been a great leader in space exploration. All the democracies of the world look to you." "Democracies," Luau spit out in disgust. "Democracies are nothing but chaos. What do you have? Maybe at best 60% of the eligible people registered, and of that, maybe 50% were vote. So what do you have? You have a third of the entire so-called democratic society voting, and what of them? The ones deciding the leaders of their society. How many of them ever even bother to investigate what or who they vote for? They will always be part of the electorate that will blindly follow ideology over facts. They will seek out the headlines or newscasters that will justify their ideological ignorance. No, the world needs a leader. The world needs a commander. The world needs Commander Kwan. Sir, Leo actually saluted my Kwan. To Anna's dismay, he saluted back. "So, what are you going for now, Father? The benevolent dictator?" "You all speak too much. I am doing this for Anya. You dare say that you're killing people for my mother? Stop, I'm not. It's for humanity. Your mother would want us to reach to the stars." Anna moved forward. "Father, please." She touched his arms. "Please. I know we haven't been close for a while, but please, I beg you, stop this crazy plan. I know of this alien that may be influencing you. I know you. This is not you. Let me back in." He held her eyes with his as he reached for her shoulder. As he slowly pulled her into an embrace, he looked out at the bow of his ship. "Oh, Anya." Anna stopped and pulled away. "No, Father. Anna," she said as she held her hands to her chest. "Anna, your daughter. My mother is dead. Anya is gone. No, she's here." He pointed toward his mind. She's here." He looked out the viewplate and gestured with both hands out into space. "She's here. A little piece of her is still here." Full of concern, Anna moved close to him and touched his shoulders. "Father, please." "No." He moved away. "No." He looked directly at Anna and became very quiet. "No. You just tried to confuse me. I'm doing what is right. For your mother, for all of us. I can feel it." Anna could see him struggling. "Please." Bai Quan held up his hand. "No more. For now you are my guests. Liao, show them to their quarters. Make sure they are comfortable." "Yes, sir." "And Liao, no harm will come to them. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir." "Good day." He crossed his office to a hatch behind and to the right of his desk. Before he passed through the doorway, he stopped for an instant. He started to turn toward Anna, but then he quickly stepped through the opening and the hatch slid shut. For at least 20 seconds, they all stood and looked at the closed doorway. Finally, Anna broke the silence. Captain Thompson, you have your orders. That's from chapter 1.
Wow. I'm like totally sucked in. I'm mesmerized here. We've got a lot of questions out here for you, Art. Are you ready to let the folks, the good folks from YouTube and Facebook, ask you a couple of questions?
I am, and if it's okay with folks, at some time I would like to read just about 3 or 4 minutes more of chapter 4 from the new book, if that's permissible. But you let me go.
Absolutely. Let's take a couple of questions and then hear a little more. And folks that ask questions are going to be put into a drawing to win your book. So Make sure you stick around at the very end there and wait for me to scream out your name, and that you'll be walking away with the book. So let's take a question from Kamala Itzel Hayward. What was your main inspiration for book 1?
My main inspiration was the science, but I've always wanted to create a utopic version of the future as opposed to a dystopic. And so I thought that by doing that, and the science being a key part of it, that I would experiment with what happens when good people see things going wrong all around them, and then how do they deal with it? And that's what I tried to think about when I was doing this novel. So, I mean, really the main inspiration was trying to do 2 things: get the science in the book, just to make people think, and because it's all around us right now, even though it's very young, and to try to write something that might be more of a less of a dystopic story, more of a utopic story, or a potentially good story, good future, potential better future. Yeah.
So here's one that I'm going to ask you twice. I'm going to ask this next question twice. Actually, this one's coming from Megan Guerrero. Where can one find your book? That'll be the first time I ask you that, and I'm going to ask you again just to make sure everybody knows. So where would we find the book?
It's on Amazon right now under the title The Children of the Stars. You have to write that in here. Book 1 SAIQA, and it's actually for self-publishing, self-marketing. It's got about a little over 600 books sold worldwide. Recently, some books have been sold in Japan, which is kind of cool. So. Yeah, please check it out.
Awesome. Here's one from Josh Guerrero. I don't know if they're related. Did you experience writer's block when you wrote your novel?
I did. And it was right at the beginning of the novel. And part of what helped me get through that is Stephen King's On Writing. I was stuck on rewriting the first chapter and not knowing where to really go. I mean, I had in my head where I wanted to go with it, but I didn't know how to start it, because I wanted to, in my mind, I wanted a finished product, which of course is silly, but that's what I wanted. So I was hesitant to go forward. And Stephen King got me out of that with his general note of writing at least 10 chapters and then go back and do the rewrite, because by then you know what the characters are doing, how they live, how they breathe, and how they're telling the story. And that was really sage advice, at least for me.
Perfect lead into you reading a little bit more. Does book 2 pick right up where book 1 left off? Again, from Kamala Itzel Hayward.
Yes, it does. As a matter of fact, it picks up right off where Johnny Blue Feather Smith was in big trouble in the cave, and that's where it starts.
Excellent. Well, why don't you pick up where you left off and give us a little bit more of that while we have your time and have you here.
So this is from chapter 4, which was one of my favorite chapters so far in the second novel, and I like it because of how it turned out. A lesson learned here, speaking of writer's block, is I wanted to tell the story from Eric. I wanted to explore Eric's lighter side, the side of him that makes him more human, of course. And when I started it by writing about what I thought Eric was like. And I realized after about 2,000 words into it that I was writing a book report. And I threw it all away and then restarted with Eric talking and speaking and telling me what he was doing. And from there, it blossomed to what right now is one of my favorite chapters. This is a critical part of that chapter. It's near the end of it, and it describes more of the chaos that's going to happen. Eric finally did get some sleep, though he tossed and turned for the better part of the night. Because of that, his deep sleep came late morning. He woke somnolent from his deep dreams. He could only remember a couple of them, not bad, but intense, visual, something like a virtual world 3D photon video game. He shook his groggy head. It was later than he would have liked. He ultimately made his way to his privy for morning activities, used the bathroom, showered, shaved, dressed. Having finished his latrine and putting on his uniform, Eric made his way to the Renaissance for a late morning cup of coffee. He was in a bit of a hurry. He did tell SAIQA that he would see her before morning duty. "Morning, Eric." It was Carol. "My goodness, you get around." "Well, like I said last night, I was helping Miguel, and I do own this shop, and I need to be here for you guys. Besides, what better way to keep up on what's going on than working here on the officer's deck and up at the crow's nest above Admin Khan?" "Good point," Eric chuckled. "The usual?" "Yes, please. One medium coffee with an added shot of espresso coming up. What's your day like?" She got to work and had it for him within minutes. "I promised SAIQA I would see her before duty today, so I'm heading there shortly." "You mean her matriculation room?" "Yeah, well, we'll see you later." "Yes, you will." She smiled faintly. Eric paid and strolled out into the community area. Boy, she's been acting weird lately, he thought as he left. He took a moment and sat in the virtual sunlight. There were mostly officers in dress moving about, some scurrying, probably late for duty. Here and there a civilian passed by. He took a few sips of his coffee, looked at his HCI. It was a little over an hour to his call. He decided he would go up to see SAIQA. He made his way to a lift that would take him the few floors or few decks up to the administration deck. He wound his way around the deck to SAIQA's main communication room. As he entered, he saw Lee at her desk, pushing some notepads around. Just like Eric, she was hit hard by Tafidi's death. "Hi, Lee. How are you?" "Well, hi. I'm having difficulty trying to organize Tafidi's notes. He's got notepads scattered all over the place." Well, outside of his mind, he was never very good at being organized. Eric gave a sad chuckle. "True," she nodded her head. "I also find myself reading and in my mind hearing his voice." Her eyes watered. Eric walked over and touched her shoulder. "Oh, I found this pad in the back of a use box where Tafidi had some clothes stored. It had some of his poetry in it. One of them he labeled as one of his favorites, but I've never seen it before. Would you like to see it?" "Of course I would, but I need to see SAIQA first. I promised her." "Gotcha. You know where the matriculation chairs are. I'll set this aside for you." Eric nodded and turned toward the chairs to see SAIQA. "He was a good man," Lee said quietly. Eric turned back to her. "Yes, he was." They acknowledged her sadness for a few seconds. Then Eric headed over to meet with SAIQA. Eric appeared in SAIQA's designated meeting area. She was wearing a long, soft green dress that seemed to move in a slight breeze. Eric was impressed by the reality of her virtual environment. The hills above the cove, all covered with variegated vegetation, the blue sky, the sand, her cabana, all looked completely real. The only oddity would be the electrons that at various spots came rolling down the hills like water and filled up the cove. They even looked like water, for they had a constant sparkle across the top and below the surface, like moving water reflecting, dancing in the sun. Except there was no sun in her virtual world. The light seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at the same time. Eric was drawn towards SAIQA as she walked, or more like glided to him. Her long white hair and green dress flowed gently as she came near. Her blue-green eyes seemed to stand out even more because of her green dress. She made herself look quite beautiful, Eric thought. As she came up to him, she reached around him and gave him a light hug. "Are you okay?" he asked her as he reached around to return the hug. "I am, and I am not." Eric nodded. He would hold her till she released him, and after a few seconds she did and stepped back. "I am glad you are here, Eric. Aside from the feeling of loss from Tafiti's death, and now that I am more aware of existence, I am in conflict about my purpose here. I do recognize I have responsibilities to you and all the humans aboard Sanctuary, yet I was not asked to be put in this position. At the moment, we need you, SAIQA. I am quite aware. I will not do my duties, Eric, and I recognize I was not fully aware of my sentient abilities at the time of my birth, though I wonder if the Creator could have known of any potential for self-awareness. She looked away, possibly towards the Ark. I know from conversations with Tafiti, he believed you capable of attaining consciousness. I wish I could offer you more wisdom, SAIQA, but I don't have his brilliance. If only he were here. I know, Eric. She touched his cheek. I miss him too. Yet I appreciate you. Suddenly, she stepped back and looked up to her right. They are coming. We are under attack. She brought her two fists together. The lights changed in the sky to flashing red as she sounded the red alert throughout the sanctuary. Then she looked up at Eric with deep concern. Eric, someone just entered the matriculation room cloaked. They are moving towards you. You must leave. Eric started to reply, but SAIQA quickly started to fade and shrink. He could see the surprise in her eyes as she simply vanished. He stepped toward where she was, but she was gone. Eric, she contacted him telepathically. Please leave my virtual land. I believe you are in danger. All right, SAIQA, but where are you? I don't know how, but I am trapped in Myquan's virtual office. Leave! Eric left his electron self and triggered the release of his hands. He quickly pulled off the matriculation mask, only to see a blonde woman seemingly float out of the top of a cloaking device, and held high in her right hand was a knife. She saw him take off the mask and immediately plunged the knife towards his heart. Eric's luck held as he managed to move to his right at the last moment. Still, she was quick. She might have missed his heart, but her stab plunged deep into Eric's upper torso just below his left shoulder. It had to have been a molecular sharpened knife. It went smoothly through his strong muscles and possibly out the backside. She mumbled something in disgust and pulled the knife out. Eric screamed in pain, not only from the initial blow, from the knife leaving the body as it did more damage. She raised the knife for another blow. As she brought the knife down, Eric managed to move through the pain and punch her with his right hand. Even so, she managed to cut through the upper left arm tissue. She became visibly frustrated and raised the knife again. Eric was nearly passed out from pain. In the distance, he could hear Lee yelling. That's it.
All right, ticket price pays for the whole seat, but you'll only need the edge. Good golly, my friend. Wow.
It's a lot of action in the second novel.
Clearly.
Tafiti, for folks who have read it, Tafiti was a big part of the first novel. I am an emotional guy, and I remember when I had to write him dying, I was crying because I was like, no. But yeah, it was important. It was an important part of moving the story forward, as the author says. But he was a really big and important part of the first story. So. And
clearly, an important part of your artistic process in this too. You clearly you've embedded yourself into these characters. So, what a loss that must have been.
Yeah, he was mentor to SAIQA. So yeah. Anyway.
Well, we've got a couple more questions coming from. This one looks like from YouTube. Ken Knight, any news on movie industry wishing to adopt your work?
No. would that were so.
Budget. My gosh, the descriptions alone. I mean, wow. Let's see. This is a great question. Again, from Kamala. How many books do you expect to be in the series?
So I expect the second book to finish this story, and the epilogue I'm going to write in the second book will go to a different time, and then I'm going to play it by ear. My next novel is a magical realism that's a little bit dark, but running around my brain, which I've already written a synopsis for, and I intend to write that before I go back into this story. But if I do, this is where Isaac Asimov influenced me. The Foundation trilogy for his novels, Foundation stories, took place over generations or over different centuries, different times. And I think that's worth experimenting with. And so I think after I do the epilogue on the second story, I'm going to leave it as it's going to be about the next potential story, which will be for another couple hundred years in the future. Yeah. And in that novel, the Enneagreen and the humans will be allies. So it'll be an interesting experiment. Anyway.
You've got your work cut out for you. Ellen Chestnut asks, would you record it as an audiobook at some point?
Yes, I would very much like to do that. Yeah, I've been looking at different facilities to do that. There is software that can be available that I can use it on my laptop because it doesn't make any noise. There is a friend has a recording studio in San Rafael. I just need to get the right equipment in terms of speaking, of a filter like Amy has, and a good microphone. So that's basically what I need to do. But the software is there.
Excellent. I love that. I do a lot of audiobooks, especially at work. So yeah, I can go through a couple a week. So yay. Mm-hmm. Karen Lovato, how soon is the second book out? Inquiring minds want to know.
The second book will be out this year. How soon, I don't know. I know that I'm going to do a pre-sale on it on Amazon sometime in the next couple of months. And we'll have a date by that time.
So, and then just a reminder, I told you I was going to ask this twice. Where can one find your book? Amazon.com. And here's what, whoa, there we go. I'm kind of cattywampus, but there's the book. The book. I own the book. I'm so impressed.
Thank you.
The amount of detail and description in here is just, it's mind-blowing. If you can't get sucked in, then something's wrong. I mean, there's so much, and that's what I like about books like this, is that I literally get pulled into the environment. And so for me, it plays like a little movie in my head because I'm weird that way. But the fact that everything is described in such dramatic detail is wonderful for the reader. Let's see what else we have. Damian Salinas is on his second read. So there you go. Liked it so nice, he's reading it twice. We gotta love that.
Thanks, Damian.
So I think we've pretty much gone through all of the questions. People are looking forward to book 2, and they're pretty excited that they now know where to find book 1. So Art, I appreciate you spending the evening with me tonight. This has been an incredible journey through space and through pages and through your mind. What a huge task, and what an amazing thing. And thank you so much for letting us scoop book 2 right here on Books on Stage at the Cloverdale Performing Arts Center and get a little taste of what's coming down the pike for the second book. I greatly appreciate that. That was very kind on your part to share that with us.
Thank you.
And we are going to have Amy. I think Amy is going to randomly select a winner of your book and let me know who that might be, perhaps. She's thinking about it. There's a little bit of a lag. So, she really did randomize it. Kamala Itzel Hayward, you are the winner of tonight's book from Art Whyte. Yay! That's awesome. That's awesome. Art, again, I love you so much. Thank you. You're very great.
Thank you.
Spend the time with us. I appreciate all of our watchers, people that have joined us. This recording will get posted up live, so if you came in late, you can catch the whole thing. We appreciate everybody coming down and spending the evening with us. Art, book 2, can I get you to come back for another Books on Stage once you get that one publish?
Oh yeah. No, that'll be fun. I would look forward to that.
Okay, and Kamala, if you are still out there, my darling, send a message to us here on Facebook and get us your information so that we know how to get that book out to you, because I'm not giving up mine. Art Whyte, thank you so much. The book is The Children of the Stars, Book 1, SAIQA, available on Amazon.com. On behalf of the Cloverdale Performing Arts Center, I thank you all for joining me this evening. Everyone be safe, wash your hands, wear your mask, and shelter in place just a little bit longer. We're going to continue to bring you entertainment. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.
Good night.